Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. Does that sound familiar? You heard that night after night after night, morning after morning after morning, day after day after day, and you still keep hanging around. There's some of you that I haven't managed to make your ears bleed yet, I guess. St. Valentine's Day. I'm glad to have you with me here this evening. Gee whiz. Well, I titled the show, I Need Your Feedback, because I've been mulling something over in my head. And the best place to go to for the answers, I think, is to the listeners. And here's the issue. I have been doing all these shows, and some nights I do 3 or 4. Sometimes I only do a couple. And once in a while, I do as many as 7 or 8 or 9. I think one night I even did like 11 shows. So I'm covering a really wide gambit of the news for you folks, trying to get everything out there that I think that you need to be aware of. And there's that I could probably stop doing shows on, but I'm wanting to hear from you guys on what it is that you want me to do shows on. Do you want me to do more political type news? Do you want me to do more recall news? Do you want me to do more scientific news? Is there something that you don't want me to do? Are we back? I'd like to hear from my moderators. Are you out there listening? Because for some reason my show went cattywampus here and I had to dial back in. Where's my moderators? Okay, I see where you put that I lost the feed. I should be back now. Okay, all right. Well, that was fun. Took a trip and didn't leave the farm. Okay, back to where I was before I was so rudely interrupted. I don't even know what that was because my internet box says that I had a connection the whole time, so I don't know what that was all about. But anyway, what I was saying is there parts of the news that you're not interested in me reporting on? Is there anything that you can see that you're just not interested in particularly and would like for me to leave it off? Maybe you don't like the recall stuff, or maybe you don't like scientific news, or maybe you don't like the political news. You know, is there something I'm doing that you don't like? I realize that you can always, that you don't like. My main contention at this point is that last night I did 3 hours of video. That does not include the prep time and everything involved in putting it out there, because I have to read this news, I have to log this news, I have to set up the shows on YouTube, and then I do the shows, and then I have to send out the notices to all the social media and stuff that I've done the shows. So, you know, it takes far longer than what recording time there is involved. And spring is on its way. Soon going to be spring cleaning time and garden time and time to do outside chores. And I know you all are going to have the same things going on and not going to have as much time to listen. So I'm trying to figure out where I need to trim the fat here to get this down so that you're happy and I'm happy and that we can all meet at a happy medium. So that's where my viewers come in, and I'm hoping that you'll all give me some feedback on what you would like to hear more of or less of. You know, the researchers that work with me spend a lot of time doing this too, and they've got other things going on. They don't want to, you know, spend every waking hour that they've got trying to find news when they've got households and gardens and things that they've got to take care of. And that kind of brings me to my next thing that I was wanting to talk about here with the week in review. The budget has been a big deal this week, and the interest rate going up. And we've got the debt ceiling facing us. They haven't made a decision on what they're going to do. They say they're going to raise it, but I don't know. I'm assuming that most of my viewers are pretty savvy in this, and that they understand that if you have a debt and they raise the rate, the interest rate that you're paying on that debt, that means you have to pay out more money. And if you're not bringing in enough to meet the interest on the debt that you're paying now, and they're raising the interest rate, that only means that you're going to be in the hole further. The country is in the hole right now, $20 trillion. I can't even wrap my brain cells around that amount of money. Trillion. If they raise the debt ceiling, that means that they're going to have to make that more than $20 trillion that the country is in debt. And they're raising the interest rate, and they say they're going to raise the interest rate a couple more times this year, at least, before the year's out. Now, there's not enough money coming in to pay the debt the way it is now. And even though Trump is cutting costs left, right, and sideways, and my hat's off to him. I think that in that respect, he's been doing a real good job, but he can't cut everything back enough to pay back the money that the country is in debt. Therefore, every time they raise the debt ceiling and the interest rates, it makes the bubble bigger. And when the bubble pops, and it will pop, there will come a time when they're not going to raise that debt ceiling. We're in big trouble. As the people that are going to get the fallout from the bubble bursting, we are the ones that are in trouble. So I wanted to bring that out and talk a little bit about this, the budget and the squalling that's going on. And because there's a lot of people that's doing a lot of squalling, because we have to go through some cuts here. We have to. I mean, if you're running, I look at it as if you're running a household. And if you've only got, say you've got $300 coming in, but your utilities and your living expenses, you have to have food, you have to have, car insurance, you should have some kind of house insurance, you have to keep your vehicle up, put gas in it, oil changes, tires, all that has to be figured into your budget. You've got food that you have to buy, clothing, you probably have to pay some kind of rent or mortgage, or you got, if you own, you have property taxes, there's your phone, your internet, your television service, if you got that, your electric or gas, or however you're doing that, maybe water, trash removal, all that has to be figured in. And if you're bringing in $300 and you're spending $500, you're going in the hole. You're not bringing in enough money to cover the debt. And that's what's been going on with this country, that these guys get in office and they just spend money because it's not their money, just open up that purse string and dip out the people's money and spend it on whatever. And we can't keep going in that direction. Eventually, you hit bankruptcy when you do that. And that's the direction that the country has been headed for a very, very long time. People say, oh, we'll never have a depression like the one back in the 20s. No, we won't have one like back in the 20s. We're going to have one far worse than what they had back in the 20s, because we are spoiled people at this point with all the niceties that we've had. They didn't have all the nice things that we have back in the 20s. And we're going to be, we've been spoiled running to the grocery store. People go to the grocery store every day. Back in the 20s, they was lucky to get to the grocery store at all, much less, go every day, maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks to buy groceries. Well, now I've got news for you. You ain't gonna be going to the grocery every day when the when the bottom falls out of this whole thing. There may not even be a grocery store to go to. And even if you can get there, it's going to be so expensive you won't be able to buy anything anyway. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this budget and the things that's being cut, and these people squalling and bawling about all of this. I covered a couple articles on it this morning in the news. One of them was Trump wanting to slash the EPA's budget to the lowest level in 40 years. And, that's got the Democrats up in arms. And, oh, my God, he wants to cut the EPA budget down. And, oh, what are we going to do? Well, I got news for you. If the bottom's falling out of this whole thing, he's only wanting to cut from down to 5.7 billion. And I got news for you. It needs to be cut far deeper than that with the rate this country is headed. Completely. And let's see, there's another one. It's a meltdown because he's wanting to completely eliminate the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. Yes, that has got to go. I mean, the government doesn't have any business in that anyway, as far as I'm concerned. That should be self-funded. They need to raise their own funds on their own time for that. The government can't be just standing around handing out money left, right, and sideways when they haven't got the money to lend out. They're not lending it, they're giving it to them. That needs to stop. I mean, let's face it, when your household is down to having nothing in the cupboard, nothing in the refrigerator, and probably no electricity to run the refrigerator, even if you had something to put in it, are you really worried about the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for Humanities? Are you really worried about the EPA? I mean, we got to cut this back to the point where it's making some sense. This has gotten totally out of control. And then, like last week, I gave you a couple tidbits on that I didn't put in the ones for the week. So I've got a couple here for you that I'll attention. This one is off of BizPac Review. It says Pelosi outdoes herself and perhaps all dams with bizarre statement on Trump's quotes stupid budget. Senior House member demonstrated Thursday why Democrats have little understanding of economics and why they should never be placed in charge of a budget. Nancy Pelosi described the Trump administration's budget proposal introduced Thursday as stupid and then exhibited her own stupidity when she added that nothing brings more money to the Treasury than education. The administration posed to make significant cuts to numerous departments, agencies, and programs, including $9.2 billion from the Department of Education, representing a 13.5% slash from last year, according to CNN. At a press conference, the California Democrat called the education cuts stupid and a slap in the face. She says, remember this, nothing brings more money to the Treasury than investment in education. So when the Republicans say we need to reduce the deficit and therefore we must cut education, that is a stupid economy. Again, nothing brings more money to the Treasury to reduce the deficit than the education of the American people, she repeated. The Department of Education wasn't created until 1979 under then President Jimmy Carter. It could be argued that it wasn't until then that the public education in the United States began faltering. The administration proposed spending $1.4 billion to expand vouchers so that students can attend non-public schools, including private schools, the Los Angeles Times reported. But apparently, liberals don't want inner city children to experience a private school education. They want to keep that just for their own kids. President Obama fought the notion of a voucher program while sending his two daughters to a private school. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for not funding that and, let the schools get back to being schools and get the federal government out of it. That is how we have dumbed down the nation. That's why the Democrats want to keep funding it, is because they're trying to keep the kids stupid As they grow up, they're going to be another generation of snowflakes or worse. Get the government out of the schools. I have been saying for years, educate your own kids, homeschool your kids. School system, get them away from the government. This, it takes a village to raise a kid's a bunch of crap. We need to cut the crap and get back to teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. The kids are getting out of school. They don't even know how to read or write. I did a story the other day for y'all about teachers that can't even pass the I can't even talk. The literacy exam for being able to pass the teachers to teach your kids. If you got a teacher in there that can't read or write, how the hell are they supposed to educate your kids? What is that? And then let's see, we got another one here. This is off BizPack. It says Tillerson publicly talks to press for the first time, and his answer on State Department budget cuts will blow you away. And is confident that the State Department will run more efficiently after budget cuts proposed by President Trump. Efficiency is not usually what one would associate with Trump agencies, let alone touting budget cuts to make it happen. But the Secretary of State told reporters in Tokyo Thursday that current spending at the State Department would not be sustainable moving forward. Well, that's a refreshing change of pace and strategy. Of spending that the State Department has been undertaking, in particular this past year, is simply not sustainable. As time goes by, there will be fewer military conflicts that the U.S. will be directly engaged in. The conference marked the first time the Secretary of State publicly answered reporters' questions since he assumed office. Tillerson was in Tokyo on the first stop of his 6-day, 3-nation. The president's proposal would cut 28% of the budget for the U.S. diplomacy and foreign aid, Rutgers reported. But Tillerson defended the need for the cuts as necessary to correct a historically high budget. I'm confident with the input of the men and women in the State Department, we'll construct a way forward that allows us to be much more effective, much more efficient, and be able to do it with a lot fewer dollars, he said. Tillerson admitted it would be challenging, but said he accepted that challenge willingly. We understand the challenge, the former ExxonMobil CEO said. I take the challenge that the president has given us on willingly and with great expectation that everyone in the State Department's assistance, we're going to deliver a much better result for the American people in the future. NBC talking heads weren't impressed with Tillerson's statements and lamented on what the cuts would do to the agency's morale. The taxpayers footing the bill. I mean, it's time that we get some common sense back in this thing. Spend more than you're bringing in. You spend less so that you have investable money in the future when the crap hits a fan. Emergencies arise that you have to have some money to fall back on. You can't just keep printing money and printing money and printing money, nothing to back it up, just printing money. It inflates everything. Can we not take a look at what has been going on around the world with Greece and with Germany and with Venezuela and India and these other countries on what has been taking place and can't see that it's going to come here? We can't just keep the printing press running. We've got to cut out the pork. Cut it out. People just seem to be oblivious to what's going on. I don't understand it. So, I was talking about spring coming and putting out a garden. I'd like to get across to everybody is, with spring coming, you better be thinking about getting a garden out. You better be thinking about how you can put up some food. Well, I don't have extra money to spend at the grocery store. Well, if you can at least come up with garden seeds, even if you share garden seeds, you get some and you have a friend that gets some, and you say, okay, we're going to split these seeds out. You know, I've got beans and peas, and you've got squash and corn, or, you know, whatever, and you give me half of your seeds, I'll give you half of my seeds, and we'll get gardens out so that, you know, we can at least have some vegetables to eat this summer, if not put some up so that we have some over the winter. And the cost of it with somebody, and being able to get some garden stuff in. Use your head. Think about what all you want to put in a garden and how much space you've got for a garden, or are you just going to do some container gardening? Have you got a patio? You know, maybe you live in town and you don't have yard. Maybe you just have a patio. You can grow a certain amount of stuff if you just get some pots and or buckets with some stuff in it. Make sure you got some drainage in there for it. But you can grow stuff right out on your patio. They've got these new things out now. I think they're, to me, I think they're a little pricey. You can probably even make your own. They're called tower gardens, or you put up some fencing. You hang these bottle gardens on there where you just grow stuff in. It looks like a 2-liter bottle that they cut the bottom off of and hung it upside down and pack it full of dirt and plant your seeds or your plants or whatever in that and hang it on the fence, and you grow it vertically instead of horizontally. There's a lot of different things you can do. You can get on YouTube and type in gardening and come up with all kinds of ideas to be able to grow some of your own on your own and not be dependent on a grocery store. If you're not prepping, you better get to prepping. You better get to looking at what you deal with every day in your household and be thinking of ways that if it hits the fan and I don't have money to pay for electric, what am I going to cut out? I mean, I've already read you stories about, what was it, Philadelphia, where they're paying over $300 a month for water. Okay, if they raise it that high, am I going to be able to pay it? Number one. Where am I going to get water? Number two. You need to find out where the natural springs are, or you need to find somebody that's got a well that will allow you to come and get some 5-gallon buckets of water at a time, and you better have some kind of a filtering system available so that you can filter your water. And you better figure out, okay, if I'm going to have to cut electricity, how am I going to do my laundry? And find you a way that you're going to be able to wash your laundry by hand. You better be thinking about how you're going to keep your food cold. Because if you don't have money to run the refrigerator and pay the electricity, you're going to need a way to keep food cold or keep it preserved. There's a lot of ways to preserve food to where you don't need a refrigerator. If you got pets, how are you going to take care of the pets if we hit a big depression? How are you going to keep them fed? You can't even afford to buy food for yourself. What are you going to do about the animals? Look around at the things that you do every day, and how are you going to take care of yourself if it hits the fan? And I think it's coming. I don't know how soon it's going to come. If you're not stacking some silver or some gold, you need to get to doing that. If you've been doing it, you need to do some more of it. What all kinds of things can you cut out that you have now that you won't need when it happens? Things that you haven't touched in a while, it's just sitting there. Maybe I'll need them someday kind of things. If you can sell a few of those things, take that money and go buy you some silver, because that could be extremely beneficial to you in the future. If they confiscate the bank accounts, you know, that's what I've been hearing, to bail in. They shut everything down. The money that you got in the bank is going to go to bail out the bank. So you're going to be kissing your money goodbye in the bank. But if you got some silver that you got stashed back in a bolted down safe someplace, that could be your salvation and keeping yourself alive when this all hits the fan. It's things to think about. And I don't want to be a gloom and doomer, but man, oh man, you can't just keep going in a negative direction. I learned that years ago the hard way. You can't keep going in a negative direction. Eventually, you're going to hit the wall. And I think that wall has some handwriting on it right now. But that's the stuff that I was kind of wanting to touch on tonight. The debt ceiling, that they're saying they're going to raise it, and I'm wondering, well, okay, how much are you going to raise it? Are you going to raise it? I think that if anybody can stay within the budget, it'll be Trump. But there, and again, if they're going to keep raising the interest rates up, more and more difficult to keep it paid back. And what happens when it does hit the wall? What happens when they decided, okay, boom, we're going to knock the bottom out of this bucket? People are going to get up in arms and have a fit and call for Trump's head? And what happens after that? So, that's that's a big question mark. You got to wonder what's happening with that. And as usual, I have way more questions than I got answers. I wish I had the answers to it. Man, oh man, I'd be a multi-gazillionaire if I knew all that. My goodness. So I've got a here from the chat room. We'll pull this up and see what this says. This is about Fukushima. Nuclear engineer, my biggest concern is Fukushima plant will collapse. Concrete under reactor is being eaten away. There's ongoing chemical attacks. Containment structures are tilting in jeopardy of falling over. Pat Thurston, host, says there's a story that's going around the internet. Snopes says there's nothing to verify that this is true. I guess TEPCO is denying it, but there's a story going around that the container or containment structure is in jeopardy. It's tilting. It's in jeopardy of falling over. So we'll talk about that too, if it's even a possibility. Were that to happen, what would it mean? First, to the issue of potential collapse of the building, for the building to topple over, for it somehow to collapse. Is that a thing? Can it happen? And Arnie Gunderson, nuclear engineer, says, yeah, it can happen. That's my biggest concern. Trapping all this groundwater on site and essentially making the ground mushy. There's already significant damage to the reactor buildings. The entire coast of Japan dropped 3 feet during the earthquake and never rebounded. But the Fukushima site didn't fall straight. It fell at an angle. It's about a 2-inch incline across the site now. So the buildings are in mushy ground and they're not quite straight. The other part is that there's toxic brew of radioactive chemicals inside there, but there's also just chemicals. They're eating away at the concrete and they're eating away at the steel. It's a nasty chemical broth inside these plants. My fear is that there's a Richter 7 quake, not the Richter 9 that happened 6 years ago. If there's a Richter 7 quake on that site, it could breach those containments. The horse is out of the barn at that point. Discussion continues the 32-minute mark in on a video. It says on toppling over, probably half the concrete inside the containment that was originally there has been eaten away by the radioactive fuel, and there's ongoing chemical attacks. So I really think the concrete under the containment is pretty darn punky, resembling punk in being sort of being soft or rotten. Right now, it's getting punkier as time goes on. So, Fukushima is is a nightmare. It's already poisoned the ocean. I've talked to people that want to, poo-poo everything that I say on that topic. That the ocean is being poisoned with the Fukushima and all that. Oh no, the ocean's fine. Well, and it's not just Fukushima. I mean, we have nuclear plants right here in the United States that are leaking, poisoning the lakes and poisoning the ocean on the East Coast and everything else. And that's something else I was wanting to talk about, come to think of it. Supposed to eat, because our water has been polluted, and what hasn't been polluted, they're putting all kinds of crap in it. They put fluoride and all kinds of garbage in our water. Then you've got I read the story the other day about the chickens. You know, they can't seem to butcher chickens without getting manure all over the meat, telling you, you know, you need to stay away from that or you end up with E. coli. And then they had the fish with pus. I read that story the other day. So you can't have that. And then I've read all these recalls on the pork and the chicken because it's got listeria, or it's got contaminants. One had metal shavings in it, and the other one had plastics in it from the packaging. So you can't get any of that stuff now unless you're. We can't eat the grains or the fruits or the vegetables because of the herbicides and pesticides that they're spraying all over it. So what the hell are we supposed to eat? You're growing your own and you know what kind of ground you got to put in, and you know what you're using on it to keep the bugs off of it and keep the weeds out of it, you know, or raising your own meat. And even then, if you're raising your own meat, where's the food coming from that you're feeding it? It's in your backyard that are free range or something. Because whatever goes in an animal is what's going to come out in the meat product. And that's why everybody's so sick, because what's going into our bodies is the thing that's making everybody sick. Even with all the stuff that's going on in Washington, D.C., I hear very little outrage or anything being done about trying to straighten up our food supply. Now, I guess there's going to be some lawsuits about Roundup being used on the crops because of the glyphosate in it, because apparently Monsanto skewed some studies on glyphosate being a carcinogen. And that's what's in Roundup, and you know, that's part of the reason more and more and more people all the time are coming down with cancer. But I don't, you know, if Washington wants to do something about something, why don't they stop our food supply from being poisoned? Why don't they do something about the water supplies being poisoned or chemicals being dumped into it? Why do we have vaccines being shoved on the children? I mean, how big of an idiot do you have to be not to see that the mercury and all of the other garbage that they're putting in these vaccines, and demanding that your kids get vaccines, or they're going to haul your kids off and take control of them, and they won't allow them in school. You know, they got all these criteria. They're trying to do away with you being able to be a conscientious objector to having your kids shot up with all this garbage. When does this foolishness stop? Now, I know that he appointed Robert Kennedy Jr. in charge of the vaccine thing to try to do something about it. Then, so far, the only thing that I've seen is that him and decided to offer $100,000 to anybody that could prove that mercury was good for you being shot up into you in a vaccine. And of course, nobody could produce a study on that saying that it was okay for you because none exists. So then what? We've sat here good I don't know, 3 weeks, a month since that transpired, and I don't see him doing anything to eliminate it or haven't heard nothing in the news about it. You'd think that if they was doing something to stop it, that there'd be some news on it. They just appoint somebody with a well-known name in charge of it and say, oh, it's not good for you, and then sweep it under the rug and forget about it. What the hell's going on with that? Every week it seems to be another big blow up of some kind. We had the Russians are messing with the elections. And no, they're not. And yes, they are. No, they're not. It goes back and forth like a ping pong game. And then all of a sudden it's the wiretapping and the Vault 7 and the WikiLeaks. And that's just kind of fallen by the wayside. So we're getting ready for another thing, and it's the budget, and trying to figure out where things stand with the budget. And then as soon as the budget blows away, it'll be something else. Right now, they're saber rattling with North Korea and Russia in the Middle East and all that. I'll have news on that in the morning when I read that stuff to you. Every week it seems to be a new thing, and nothing ever gets solved. I would love for something to get solved. It never seems to happen that way, though. Very interesting. But as I said, I got lots of questions. Never seem to have the answers to them. The only thing that I know for sure is that we need to get prepared. Don't rest on your laurels. Get yourself prepared. Guns and ammo so that you can protect what little you got. Make sure you got supplies laid in as best you possibly can. If you have the possibility of having some kind of a support system that you can trust. Now, that's the big one right there, being able to trust your support system, because when the going gets rough, man, you don't know who you're able to trust. Try to have some kind of a support system that you can trust and rely on. I'm not big on this bug out thing. I'm more of a dig your heels in kind of girl. But hey, you let conscience be your guide on what you need to do in order to survive. You may need to bug out of wherever the hell it is you are, then you need to be prepared for that. And have everything you need lined up in case you need to do it. If you're more like me and you think you're going to need to dig your heels in, then you need to get set up for that. I don't know how long it'll be before it happens, but it could happen within the next couple of months, or it might last several years. Who knows? I don't know what they've got in store for us. Yeah, Mary in the chat room says, learn a survival skill that you can use for barter, be it curing hide, uh, curing meat, grain grinding, making beer, something that is marketable survival skill. So that if somebody's got something that you need, maybe you've got something you can at least teach them to help them barter items too, if you can. And it doesn't have to be anything real expensive. At this present time, lighters would be a good one in case you need to start fires to cook you some food. Buckets is another good thing, something to tote water in or collect water in or tote stuff in. Because when it hits the fan, it ain't going to be like we're living now. Oh, hell no. It's going to be a whole new world. You may not have the internet when it happens either, because either it may not exist anymore, or you may not be able to get internet service. You may not have the electricity to be able to have internet service. So this is a good time to bone up on skills. There's all kinds of sites on the internet where you can learn all kinds of things. Don't be lazy about it. Learn some skills. Learn how to do things. Otherwise, you'll look back one of these days and say, boy, I wish I'd listened to her. She said all those things, but I didn't pay no attention. I mean, I can lead the horse to water, can't make it drink it. So, you know, this is your opportunity to go to figuring some things out. She's got on there, you might want to figure out how to do some indoor food growing too. That's one thing I sorely lack on. I am no good at growing houseplants. I never have been. I can grow a garden outside pretty good, but you know, indoor growing skills aren't very good. But it is something that if you can figure out how to do it properly, could be very beneficial, especially when you live in the colder climates where you can't have an outdoor garden year round. Unless you can grow enough stuff outdoors in the growing season that you can put up enough food to make it through the winter. Otherwise, you're going to get mighty hungry in the wintertime when there ain't nothing growing. So that would be something to really be thinking about, is where is your food supply going to come from? Learn how to can food. Learn how to preserve food. And let's see, she's talking about a new toilet plunger and a 5-gallon bucket to make a clothes washer. Yeah, there's... Shut that off. Man, don't know who'd be calling me this time of night. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. There's videos on the internet, on YouTube and stuff, on how to make a washer. So check some of those out and learn how to do that. Or if you got a tub and a scrub, what do they call them? Scrub board. I've got one of those myself, you know. That goes back to the old days. See, it'll be another story time for you. We're used to the electric washing machines. But before there was electric washing machines, there was the wringer washing machine. Now, those was still electric. They had a motor in them to make the agitator work. And then there was a wringer up on the top of it. So after you agitated your clothes, bucket, then you'd rinse your clothes down in the washing machine bucket. Once they was rinsed, you'd put them through the wringer. And after the water was all wrung out of them, they go through that wringer and into a basket, and you take them out and hang them up on the line. Before we had the wringer washers, we had metal tubs and a scrub board. And that's how you washed your clothes. Wring them out by hand and then hang them up on a line and dry them. So you may be, I don't know where everybody lives, but you may be looking at a place where can I hang my clothes out to dry them? And figure out, getting you a clothesline and getting you some clothespins lined up, getting you some kind of a method to be able to wash your clothes. How are you going to clean house? We've all gotten reliant on furniture polishes and all that sort of thing. You might be looking at more natural ways to clean your furniture and clean your floors, because if there ain't no stores to go buy nothing in no more, or it's too expensive to buy in the store, and you have to make your own concoction to clean your furniture and stuff with, wash your floors with, looking at some of that. There's all kinds of things on the internet that tells you how to do that. Natural cleaners. And how are you going to cook? If you don't have electricity to run the stove, do you have some kind of a grill that runs on charcoal or something that you can light outside? And do you have the charcoal and stuff that it's going to take to do that? You can build you a little wood fire and make you a little fire pit. Have you got the right kind of cookware, you know, some iron skillets and some ironware that you can use on that to cook you some food? Or do you have a propane stove? A lot of people have propane camp stoves. And do you have propane lined up that you can cook for a while? Because this ain't going to be no short-term deal. Minimum of a year. So that's something to think about. Let's see. I can't really think of anything else I was really wanting to discuss this week. I think I've pretty much covered the gambit. Well, let's see. Mary put another one up here. Let's see what this says. Pull this out of the chat room. And we're waiting on the hamster. Hamster in the wheel goes round and round. Sometimes he falls out. He's only got 3 legs. Okay, this is off of Lehman's. And it says laundry supplies. And they've got a drying rack and pant stretchers. And they have this thing called a breathing mobile washer, which is a square metal tub. And it's got this plunger looking thing. Plunger. It's a fancy plunger. They've got a portable wringer washer, just hand wringer, and they've got Argo laundry starch, and they got a clothesline prop. Now, that's a fancy one. They want $10 for that. I'll tell you what we did. We took a 2x4 and stood it on end and put a nail about 4 inches down from the top, right in the center of the top of it, and bent the nail up. And you'd stick that bottom of the 2x4 in the ground there underneath the clothesline, and then you hook the clothesline in the nail on top of it, and that propped it up. So for the price of a 2x4 and a nail, which ain't going to cost you $9.95, but you know, hey, if you want a fancy one, you can go to Lehman's and get one. And then they got an extra large arch drying rack and the peg clothesline clothespins, but you can get them $20 for those. You can go to a dollar store and get them a heck of a lot cheaper than that. They got Fell's Naphtha laundry soap, and you can take Ivory some naphtha, and you can make your own laundry soap a hell of a lot cheaper. So that's something to look up on the internet, how to make your own laundry soap by hand. And let's see, they got a homemade laundry soap starter kit. And they got little laundry cart, clothespin bags, and you can make your own clothespin bag out of a towel. They want $20 for one on here. you can take an old towel, because it's all it's going to do is hang out on the clothesline and hold your clothespins, you know. So you don't need anything real fancy. You could take one, and even if you don't have a sewing machine, you could hand stitch it, and on the sides, you know, make you a bag. You fold it like a business envelope, and at the top of it you make a hole to stick a coat hanger in it, so that you have a way to hang it up on the clothesline. And that way you got a flap. If you do a business envelope style, you got a flap over your clothespins to protect them from the weather. And you know, that's a good way to make one on the cheap. Spinning clothes dryer. They got a clothesline kit if you want to do your clothesline out of wire. They got a washboard here. Oh my God, they want $24.95 for a washboard. Amazon, you can get them cheaper on Amazon. They got laundry lug. They got trolleys. They got liners for bushel baskets to put your laundry in. Clothes dryers. They want $8.99. I'd price it at Walmart if I was you, because they do sell the 20 Mule Team Borax at Walmart. clothesline spacers, retractable clotheslines, blower dryers, all kinds of laundry detergents, a little laundry basket, clothes irons, a clothesline ratchet. It says natural laundry and hand soap. Different kinds of clothespins. Any clothes sprinkler. Well, I got news for you. We used to do clothes sprinklers with pop bottles. And let's say they got Nellie's All Natural Soda for 100 loads. And they got Arm & Hammer washing soda. Now, I think you can get that cheaper at Walmart, too. More clothespins. Rubber wheels for a laundry cart. Oh, they just got all kinds of stuff here. Rinse tubs. Clothesline pulleys. So there's a lot of stuff on the Lehman's site, and that's Lehmans. Lehmans. That's a Amish-run organization where you could go and check you out some laundry products. Even if you don't get from their site, check out the things that they've got and see if you can get it less expensive at stores in your area. At least it gives you an idea of what all you know, should the need arise. So that's something to think on. So check my chat room again here. And she's got a link up here for Amazon for a crank clothesline. So, you know, if you can check Amazon, you can check your local stores, you can check dollar stores. You know, you can pick up a lot of things just at the dollar store that are inexpensive to do stuff with. I know I use dollar store quite craft stuff because you can get a better deal there than if you're ordering it, or if you have to go to Hobby Lobby or Michael's or something. And it generally comes from the same place. Most of all that stuff comes from China. But you get a discount on it from the dollar store more than you do if you go to the specialty houses for it. But that's about all I've got for you tonight. I just wanted to talk about the budget and how we need to kind of get prepared, because I think eventually they're going to pull the plug on that bad boy. World of hurt. So no matter how well prepared you're going to be, you're never going to be 100% prepared. But you can be as prepared as you possibly could be if you can at least see it coming. The longer that they wait, the longer that you've got to get a few things lined up. Something to think about. Tell us when we was kids that to be forewarned is to be forearmed. So take this as a warning. You know, it can happen here. These other countries, they don't have a special market on going broke. Broke as this country is. And look what they've been through. So it's something definitely to think about before you go out spending money on luxury items that ain't going to do you a dang bit of good when it hits the fan. You need to be saying, well, I'll tell you what, let me just go and get a little silver here, back, and when the bottom falls out of everything, these people that's been foolish with their money and going out and buying all these luxury things that they didn't need will be trying to sell them luxury things for pennies on the dollar. One of them typed in the chat room here, everything you learn will help you survive. And that there's definitely something to be said for that. Learn as much as you can. I've got a bunch of Foxfire books, and if you're not familiar with Foxfire books, you need to familiarize yourself with them. They're the old-timey books, and they tell how all the generations past us did things, you know, like our grandparents or great-grandparents, how they used to do things back in the old days before they had benefit stores that we do now, and the electricity and all that, and how they used to cure meat, and how they used to spin wool, and how they used to make soap, and the ways that they used to cook, and the things that they used to make, and how they used to make do with things. My granny used to teach me all kinds of stuff about when she was a girl, and this was back, well, right around 1900, when she was a young girl, and how they used to make do with things. Um, my granny loved to quilt, and she would make some of the most beautiful quilts. And they weren't as fancy as a lot of the ones that I see today, but to me, they were beautiful. Used mostly scraps and old dresses and old shirts that, people were on the elbows out of, and, tore holes in them and stuff. Well, a lot of that material was still good. And she would take the good parts of the material out of these clothes. Might have to get a little bit of stuff at the store, at the fabric store, uh, to set up whatever color pattern or whatever she was using to make up the quilt that she was working on. But the majority of the material came from old clothes. And she said, well, we learned to make do with what we had. She said, you don't just go throwing stuff out. You use as much of it up as you possibly can. She would cut them pieces up with her pattern and piece them together. And she did all of her sewing by hand. She didn't use a sewing machine. And she'd piece all them pieces together, and then she'd get her backing material and her padding that she put in the middle of it, and lay it out on the bed, and she'd baste it all together, and then she'd quilt it, and then she'd put the seam binding around the edges of it and bind them off. And she said that there's all kinds of, I asked her one day, I said, well, Granny, what if you didn't have a pattern to make a quilt with? What would you do? And she says, well, you'd either make up your own pattern. She says, one thing that we used to do is we used to take the material instead of just these little squares, and we just piece them together, just whatever would fit together, and called it a crazy quilt. Get all your pieces put together big enough to make your out of them. You put your backing on and put your stuffing in the middle of it, and you baste it together just like you would a regular quilt, and then you just quilt whatever design to hold it, the whole thing together on it, and trim off your edges, and then put your seam binding on it, and you still got a quilt. She says it's just called a crazy quilt. And she taught me all kinds of things like that. And she said that she taught me how you didn't even really need to quilt one, where you was doing the design on them or quilting around the squares or whatever on it to hold the whole thing together. She says, and she showed me, run a needle down through the top, through the middle layer, and through the bottom, and then back up right next to it. And you'd have the tail where you'd started it, and you'd have the tail where you pulled the needle up, and then you tie that together. And you just do that every few inches, and all the way down the quilt until you had the whole thing filled in, and that held your quilt together. And I've still got one of those quilts around here someplace that she did that way. There's all kinds of ways that you can blankets, and if you can make stuff like that, that's another thing that you can barter. So it might be a good idea to lay some thread in. You don't have to be Einstein in order to run a needle and thread. You don't have to have a sewing machine to be able to quilt. How to get back to all the old skills that they used to do back in the day. And I know a lot of people haven't had benefit of having great grandparents or anybody that they could turn to that would teach them those kind of things. I know I didn't have that benefit on my mother's side of the family, but thank God I had it on my dad's side. Those things have been an extreme benefit that I have learned from my granny is a benefit to anybody else, of learning how to do skills and being able to survive when things get awful, well, I'd be more than happy to help. So if anybody has any questions about anything, you can ask me. If I don't have the answer, I'll try to find it out for you. But these are things that you need to pay attention to. But I digress. Let's get back to the beginning of this whole thing. If there's parts of the news that you don't on, that you don't care anything about, listen to the recalls. And if you don't want to listen to the science stuff that I do, or the medical stuff that I do, or the political stuff that I do, and sometimes I do some shows that are about anything else but political. I mean, if there's any of that stuff that just doesn't appeal to you, let me know. It turns out that I'm just not getting an audience for those things. I'll cut them out, because it's less time for me to spend and less time for my researchers to spend. And we have lives too. We've got gardens to get out and houses to clean and problems to deal with, just like anybody else. So if there's things that you enjoy more, let me know that, because I'll figure, okay, if they enjoy this more than they enjoy that, then the thing they don't enjoy is the thing that I need to start cutting down on. And when I figure I'm talking for 3 hours a night, I figure there's at least another 3 hours of prep behind that. That's 6 hours a day. That's a quarter of a doggone day. And if I had nothing else to do with my time than to do that, I'd be more than happy to. But hey, part of the reason of my retiring was that I was looking forward to doing all the things that I hadn't had time to do in my life. And now it feels like I'm kind of buckled down to the news for 6 hours a day, whatever it is. And working your tail off, you kind of like to get paid a little bit. So I'm not asking anybody to pay me. Don't take that the wrong way. I mean, if you got money to spare, you want to send me some silver, I got news for you. I've got lots of things that I want to do. And I don't mind helping people out and giving them a little news, but hey, I've got a life too. And we'll try to cut this down so that everybody's happy, or at least you can't please all the people all the time. Maybe you can please some of them once in a while. With that being said, I'll let you go so you can enjoy the rest of your St. Patrick's Day and on the news in the morning. Y'all have a wonderful evening.